All you need is love? Nope. All you need are these conspiracy theories about the Fab Four, the Beatles. Let's talk about them. Welcome back to our channel, and today we're going to be discussing some celebrity conspiracy theories. Very exciting, I know. Today's topic of discussion? One of the most popular bands to ever exist, the Beatles. And there are quite a few conspiracy theories surrounding this famous band. Today, we're going to talk about 8 of my absolute favorites. We'll start with one that I really like. The Illuminati created the Beatles to control the youth and reshape their personalities using soft drugs. This is also known as the Aquarian Conspiracy. This conspiracy theory was the brainchild of a former MI6 officer, John Coleman, back in the 1990s. In this theory, the Beatles were jettisoned to stardom with the help of a British organization that studies group behavior called the Tavistock Institute for Human Relations. Many theorists believe that this group had an ulterior motive behind their studies. I don't know, like world domination?
Try to take over the world.
Maybe. But more seriously, engineering the world's culture through pop culture itself. What better way to engineer the world's youth than by using rock music and mind-altering drugs? Sign me up. Don't do drugs, kids. For starters, the compilation entitled Past Masters is a Masonic term used to describe the former worshipful master of a Masonic lodge.
Now let's all get drunk.
What of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts? Who are all these guys on the album cover? Alright, other Illuminati cultists. You may even recognize a few. Edgar Allan Poe, Bob Dylan, Fred Astaire, H.G. Wells, Marilyn Monroe, Albert Einstein, and many more. Quote the Raven nevermore. That was dumb. And what about this album cover? The Beatles, Yesterday and Today. Dismembered babies? Check. Raw meat? Check. Satanic rituals and occult themes? Absolutely. And take a look at this promotional picture from Yellow Submarine. John Lennon flashes the devil's horns. Yep, Illuminati. And there's Paul over here making the Eyes of Horus sign, which is also interpreted as 666. The With the Beatles album cover, with all the Beatles members' faces half shaded, alludes to the Eye of Horus as well. The great part about this is that we're just getting started. Now on to probably the most popular Beatles conspiracy theory. We're just jumping right into this bad boy, guys. Paul is dead. Now this is so widely recognized as a conspiracy that it goes into urban legend status. This legend states that Paul died in late 1966 or early 1967, and he was secretly replaced by a lookalike. As far back as 1969, people have been claiming that there are clues surrounding Paul McCartney's death littered within the Beatles album covers and lyrics. Now, speculation truly began after a rumor that Paul McCartney, after having a heated argument with his fellow bandmates during a recording session, drove off angrily and died in an accident in London on the M1 motorway on January 7th, 1967. Even worse, it said that he was immediately decapitated from the accident. After his passing, it said that the Beatles held a look-alike contest so that they could replace Paul. And he was eventually replaced by an orphan by the name of William Campbell. William was then trained to mimic Paul in every single way, with some people saying that he was replaced by Britain's MI5 out of concerns that Beatles fans would riot or have severe negative symptoms or reactions after his death. September 17th, 1969, an editor for the student newspaper at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, wrote an article called "Is Beatle Paul McCartney Actually Dead?" In this article, he called out some clues that he felt backed up this rumor. Here, from the Beatles' 1968 White Album, when the song Revolution 9 is played backwards, more specifically the word number 9 itself, you can hear it saying, "Turn me on, dead man." Take a listen.
Number 9. Turn me on, Turn me Number nine.
Really creepy, right? And that's not the only clue from the White Album. At the end of the song, I'm So Tired, if played backwards, Paul can be heard saying, Paul is a dead man. Miss him, miss him, miss him. Let's listen here. Yep. In the months after, the Beatles press officer, Derek Taylor, responded to these rumors stating the following. Recently, we've been getting a flood of inquiries asking about reports that Paul is dead. We've been getting questions like that for years, of course. But in the last few weeks, we've been getting them at the office and at home, night and day. I'm even getting telephone calls from disc jockeys and others in the United States. In another clue, many state that they can hear John Lennon saying, I buried Paul, in the last section of the song Strawberry Fields Forever. This song was recorded in late 1966, right after Paul's supposed death, depending on which death you go along with in this conspiracy. Now, one of the most popular pieces of evidence is of course the Abbey Road album cover, which is said to depict a funeral procession. Left to right, we have George Harrison wearing denim, representing the gravedigger, Paul himself out of step with the others, and barefoot, symbolizing the corpse. He's also holding a cigarette in his right hand versus his dominant left hand. Yes, he was left-handed, signifying that this is an imposter. Ringo Starr in all black symbolizing the Undertaker, and John Lennon in all white representing a heavenly figure. And the final clue in this album cover, the license plate of the Volkswagen Beetle in the background. The plate number 28IF, representing that Paul's age would be 28 if he was still alive. But these aren't the only album cover clues that point to Paul's death. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts is said to represent Paul's burial. There's an open paw right over his head, similar to a priest blessing the dead. And as you can see, Paul is the only member not holding a brass instrument. Instead, he's carrying a black woodwind instrument. A bass guitar made of flowers symbolizing Paul is the final fourth and missing string. A red driving glove here symbolizing the bloody crash. And finally, if the Lonely Hearts drum in the center is seen through a mirror, it uses Roman numerals stating 11/9, he die. Though that one seems a bit far-fetched. Still pretty interesting. Now on to the sleeve art of this same album. You can see Paul wearing an Ontario Provincial Police patch. Say that 3 times fast. Which seen from the angle of the photo looks like OPD, which could mean the abbreviation officially pronounced dead. And on the backside of Sgt. Pepper's, Paul is seen facing backwards, once again setting him apart from the others. And finally, we get to the Beatles Yesterday and Today. And there are 2 different album covers, but both have their own unique clues. One representing Paul's grisly and untimely death, showing raw meat and dismembered little ones. And the other has Paul in a box, of course symbolizing him in a coffin. That conspiracy had a lot to it, but definitely interesting stuff. How about the opposite though? Every member of the Beatles died and was replaced, except for Paul McCartney. Way to flip the script. In an article written by a student at the University of Virginia named Chris Fischel, a theory is shared stating that Ringo Starr actually died first in 1963. This is represented in the album cover with the Beatles, where Ringo's face sits alone and away from the other members. Then in 1964 went George Harrison. This is clued in on A Hard Day's Night album cover, where he is the only one that's facing away from the camera and also the only one holding a cigarette. Then on to 1966 on the Revolver album, John Lennon sings the song I'm Only Sleeping, with sleep being a metaphor for death. He of course had a ton of other clues as well, and I definitely recommend reading his article to find out more about this very interesting theory. Now there's also a theory stating that the Beatles never even existed. That they were characters that have been played by many different actors over the years. Did a sinister establishment use body doubles to create a band to control the masses? Is that even a possibility? Height fluctuations from album to album, changing facial features, or even mannerisms. We'll say that this is definitely plausible, but highly unlikely due to the amount of people that would have to know about this and still keep it secret. The Beatles have been purposely hiding songs that they'll release if they ever need money. This one has been proven to be a hoax after all, but back in 1971, British teen Martin Lewis claimed that he had a bootleg copy of some Beatles songs that they had been hiding for when they need a little extra money in their bank accounts. Many Beatles fans believed him and ran away with this conspiracy theory. A few of the songs' names: Left is Right and Right is Wrong, Deck Chair, and Colliding Circles. Pretty cool names for songs. He should have probably just wrote them himself. Maybe the evil agency behind the Beatles' creation got to him and made him say that it was a hoax, even though it wasn't. Now the next one is really interesting and surrounds the death of John Lennon. Stephen King and the US government killed John Lennon. This conspiracy claims that John Lennon wasn't killed by Catcher of the Rye fan Mark David Chapman, but by famous horror author Stephen King himself, with the help of the US government, of course. More specifically, Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, who both believed that the Beatles were an attack on American values. America. And if you want to connect this even further, then this could connect back to the Beatles being created by the Illuminati with the help of a British organization. Now this was a claim by a man named Steve Lightfoot, who runs the website www.lennonmurdertruth.com. Some of the evidence includes the similarities in the faces of Mark David Chapman and Stephen King as seen in this photo. I won't lie. Eerily similar. The theory states that Chapman was just a patsy or decoy to cover up Stephen King as the murderer. Lightfoot would even go on to say that Stephen King, not Chapman, was the actual murderer. It's true or he'd sue, he would say. He never did. The motive would of course be that John Lennon had the power to change the world. He would call out all those in charge of the world and preach love above all, when war of course was needed for those who were in power to stay in power. Interesting stuff. And just as a little bonus, Paul McCartney was actually into conspiracy theories himself, being obsessed with the death of JFK and putting Easter eggs of the Paul is dead theory into his albums. Did I miss any? What do you guys think? Which of these theories do you believe? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. As always, I'm your host Morty Mouse. I'll see you later, or I'll see you at another time.
Let me on, man. Let me on, man.
Miss Bednar, is die Mr.